me help you.
For decades, he's been one of the most controlled men in Hollywood. Every move calculated, every word measured, every appearance almost too perfect. The kind of perfection that doesn't happen by accident. Because in an industry built on chaos, scandal, and unpredictability, he's remained untouched. No public breakdowns, no messy narratives, no loss of control. And that's exactly where the story starts to feel strange. Because control at that level doesn't just happen. It's maintained, protected, repeated, over and over again until it becomes the only version people are allowed to see. But then there are moments, small ones, easy to miss if you're not paying attention. A smile that lingers just a second too long. A reaction that feels just a little too intense. An interview where every word sounds precise but somehow distant. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Because those moments don't feel random. They feel contained, managed, like something is being held just beneath the surface. And sometimes it slips. Not enough to break the image, just enough to make you question it. And when you start looking closer, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Relationships that begin fast and end even faster. Almost no trace of a private life. A silence where there should be answers. People who were once close, no longer there. And no clear explanation why. In a world where everything leaks, where secrets rarely stay hidden, that kind of silence stands out. It doesn't feel natural. It feels intentional. And that's when the question changes. It's no longer about fame or success or even talent. It becomes something deeper, something harder to define. Because what if the image we've been watching for decades isn't just carefully built, but carefully controlled? And what if the man at the center of it all isn't just protecting that image, but living inside it? So the real question isn't who he is on screen, it's who he is when the cameras stop rolling, and whether that version is something we were ever meant to see.
No, I shot him. Bullets in the fall killed him.
That man is Tom Cruise. For more than 40 years, he hasn't just been a movie star. He's been a system of consistency, a brand built on precision, discipline, and control. From the early breakout in Top Gun to the global dominance of the Mission Impossible franchise, he didn't just rise to the top of Hollywood, he stayed there. While others faded, broke down, or lost relevance, he remained exactly the same. Focused, energetic, untouchable. Audiences don't just watch him perform, they expect something from him, a level of commitment that feels almost mechanical. The stunts aren't just real, they're extreme. The performances aren't just strong, they're controlled down to the smallest detail. Every frame, every movement, every expression feels intentional. And that's what makes his image so powerful, because it doesn't leave room for uncertainty, it doesn't allow cracks. In a world where celebrities are constantly exposed, where mistakes become headlines overnight, Tom Cruise has managed to exist in a space that feels almost protected, almost sealed. You don't see chaos around him. You don't see unpredictability. You see consistency. The same intensity, the same confidence, the same version of himself repeated across decades. And at first, that looks like discipline. It looks like professionalism. It looks like someone who simply mastered the system better than anyone else. But the longer that image holds, the more it raises a different kind of question. Because perfection, when it lasts too long, stops feeling natural. It starts to feel constructed. And when something is constructed, it means it's being maintained, carefully, deliberately, constantly. So the image of Tom Cruise isn't just about success, it's about control. Control over how he's seen, control over what's revealed, and maybe most importantly, control over what never reaches the surface. But that's only part of the story. Long before the image was perfected, before the control became absolute, there were already signs that something underneath was different. Tom Cruise didn't grow up in a world that felt stable. His childhood was marked by constant movement, strict discipline, and a father he would later describe as deeply controlling. That kind of environment doesn't just disappear. It leaves a pattern, a need to regain control, to structure everything, to make sure nothing ever feels unpredictable again. At one point, he even considered becoming a priest, searching for order, meaning, and something solid to hold on to. But acting offered something else, a way to rebuild identity, a way to define how the world would see him. And from the very beginning, people noticed something unusual, not just ambition, but intensity, a level of focus that didn't turn off. Directors described someone who was always on, always pushing, always refining. It didn't feel casual, it felt necessary. Around that same period, he became involved with Church of Scientology. According to him, it helped him overcome dyslexia and gave him clarity. It gave him tools, structure, direction. And at first, that seemed like a turning point in a positive way. But over time, the connection appeared to deepen. Interviews began to feel more controlled, answers more deliberate, emotions more amplified at very specific moments, almost like switches being turned on and off. Nothing clearly wrong, but not entirely natural either. And the people around him started to notice it too. A kind of presence that was intense, focused, but also distant, as if there was always a layer between him and everything else. At first, it was easy to explain. This is what success looks like. This is what dedication feels like. But the longer it continued, the harder it became to ignore. Because intensity, when it never fades, stops looking like passion. It starts looking like something else. Something driven by more than just ambition. And when you place that alongside a belief system that emphasizes structure, control, and influence, the pattern becomes harder to dismiss. Still, none of this proves anything on its own. Each detail can be explained. Each moment can be justified. But together, they begin to form a foundation. A quiet buildup of small inconsistencies that don't break the image, but do begin to challenge it. And once that challenge begins, it doesn't go away. It waits until something bigger happens, something that can't be explained as easily. And when that moment comes, everything starts to look different. For years, the intensity could still be explained. The control could still be justified. It all fit within the image of a highly disciplined actor at the top of his game. But then came a moment that didn't fit. A moment that couldn't be reframed as professionalism or passion. In 2005, during an appearance on the show hosted by Oprah Winfrey, something changed. At first, it looked like a typical interview. Controlled, friendly, predictable. But as the conversation shifted toward his relationship with Katie Holmes, the tone shifted with it. His energy spiked. His movements became exaggerated. And then, without warning, he jumped onto the couch, laughing, shouting, unable to contain what he was feeling. In isolation, it could have been seen as excitement, a spontaneous moment of happiness. But that's not how it was received, because it didn't match the image people had been watching for years. It felt too intense, too uncontrolled, too different. And within hours, that moment was everywhere, replayed, slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. It stopped being a celebration and became a question. What just happened? And more importantly, why did it feel so off? The media response was immediate. Headlines shifted tone, conversations changed direction. The narrative around Tom Cruise began to fracture. Not completely, but noticeably. And then it escalated. Around the same time, he publicly criticized psychiatry and antidepressant medication, speaking with absolute certainty on topics that many considered deeply complex. The reaction was no longer just confusion, it was concern. Because now, it wasn't just about behavior, it was about belief. Strong, unwavering belief delivered with the same intensity that had already started to feel unfamiliar. For the first time, the audience wasn't just watching Tom Cruise as a performer, they were trying to understand him as a person. And that shift is difficult to reverse. Behind the scenes, his public image reportedly began to recalibrate. Interviews became more controlled, appearances more refined. The unpredictability that surfaced in that moment was pulled back under control. But something had already changed. Because once people see something that doesn't align with the image, they start looking for it everywhere. And suddenly, every expression, every statement, every silence carries a different weight. Because now, the question isn't just about one moment. It's about what that moment revealed, and whether it was the exception or a glimpse of something that had always been there, just beneath the surface. After that moment, the conversation didn't fade. It reorganized. What once looked like isolated behavior began to connect. Patterns started to form. And at the center of those patterns was something much bigger than a single person. It wasn't just about Tom Cruise anymore. It was about the system surrounding him. His connection to Church of Scientology had always been public, but now it was being viewed differently. Not just as a belief, but as a structure. A system built on discipline, hierarchy, and control. Publicly, he described it as something that gave him clarity and direction, a framework that helped him become who he is. But according to some former members, that framework may come with expectations, influence, boundaries that extend beyond personal belief. These are claims, not confirmed facts, but they appear consistently enough to shape the narrative around him. And when you place that system next to his life, certain patterns become harder to ignore. His position within Scientology is often described as unique, not just a member, but one of its most visible and valued figures, someone who represents the organization at the highest level. And with that level of visibility comes a different kind of pressure, a need for consistency, for loyalty, for control. Then there are the relationships. His marriage to Nicole Kidman ended quickly and with very little public explanation. Years later, his relationship with Katie Holmes followed a similar pattern, but even more abrupt. According to some reports at the time, Holmes took deliberate steps to distance herself and protect her daughter. These reports were widely discussed, but never fully confirmed in detail. Still, the speed and silence surrounding both separations created a pattern that raised questions, especially when combined with ongoing speculation that personal relationships may have been influenced by external factors. Some sources have even suggested that potential partners were carefully evaluated, though there is no verified evidence to support a formal process. And this is where everything becomes more complex, because no single detail proves anything. Each event can be explained on its own. But when the same type of outcome repeats, the pattern starts to matter. Relationships begin, they intensify quickly, and then they end, almost without explanation. Publicly, everything remains controlled, clean, undisturbed. And that contrast is difficult to ignore. A highly visible life paired with an almost invisible private reality, which leads to a deeper question. Is this level of control the result of personal choice, or is it part of something larger, something structured, something that requires consistency in order to function? Because when everything aligns too perfectly, it stops looking accidental. It starts looking designed. And if it is designed, then the real story isn't just about what we see. It's about the system that shapes what we don't. By this point, the story's no longer just about patterns. It's about control. Not the kind that appears in obvious ways, but the kind that exists quietly, consistently, in everything that is shown, and everything that isn't. Because in Hollywood, where information leaks constantly and privacy is almost impossible to maintain, the absence of chaos is unusual. And in Tom Cruise's case, it's not just the absence of chaos, it's the absence of anything that doesn't fit the image. No unpredictable scandals, no uncontrolled narratives, no visible breakdowns, just the same version of him, repeated with precision across decades. That level of consistency doesn't happen naturally. It requires structure, it requires discipline, and possibly it requires protection. Some industry insiders have described him as intensely focused, highly selective, and difficult to access on a personal level. Not distant in a negative way, but contained, as if there is a clear boundary around him that very few people are allowed to cross. And that boundary doesn't just separate him from the public, it seems to separate him from anything that could disrupt the image. Even his personal life follows that pattern. There are no casual glimpses, no unfiltered moments, no spontaneous appearances that feel unplanned. Everything that exists publicly feels intentional, and everything that doesn't exist becomes just as noticeable. Because silence, when it repeats, starts to feel like a signal, especially in an environment where silence is rare. His relationship with his daughter, Suri, has often been described as distant, though there is no fully confirmed explanation for why. That lack of clarity only adds to the pattern, not because it proves anything, but because it fits. It aligns with the broader structure of control, privacy, and limited access. Over time, two versions of Tom Cruise have become more defined. The public version, energetic, charismatic, relentlessly committed to his craft. And the private version, largely unseen, defined more by absence than presence. And the longer those two versions exist side by side, the harder it becomes to believe they are completely separate. Because when control reaches that level, it doesn't just shape perception, it shapes reality. It determines what is visible, what is hidden, and what is never allowed to surface at all. And that's where the story becomes more unsettling, because it suggests that what we see isn't just a carefully maintained image, it may be the only version we're meant to see. At this point, the story stops being about what happened and becomes about what it all means. Because when you step back and look at everything together, the patterns, the control, the silence, the consistency, one question keeps coming back, and no one seems able to answer it definitively. Former members of Church of Scientology, including Leo Remini, have publicly shared their experiences inside the organization. Some of those accounts describe a system built on influence, loyalty, and control over personal decisions. According to these sources, individuals at the highest levels may receive privileges, but are also deeply connected to the structure itself. It's important to emphasize these are personal testimonies and allegations, not confirmed facts, but they have shaped how many people interpret Tom Cruise's position within that system. One of the most debated ideas is whether aspects of his personal life, especially relationships, may have been influenced in ways the public doesn't fully understand. There have been reports suggesting that certain relationships were carefully managed or evaluated, though there is no verified evidence confirming a formal process. Still, the repetition of these claims keeps the discussion alive. And this is where the story becomes more complex than a simple answer, because there are two possible ways to interpret everything we've seen. The first is that Tom Cruise is in complete control, that every decision, every image, every silence is intentional, a level of discipline and strategy that allows him to maintain one of the most consistent public personas in modern entertainment. The second possibility is very different, that the control we see isn't entirely his, that he exists within a system that requires that level of consistency, that level of precision in order to function. And the most unsettling possibility is that both could be true at the same time. That control isn't something he simply has, but something he participates in, reinforces, maintains, because power and structure don't always oppose each other. Sometimes they depend on each other. And if that's the case, then the reality behind Tom Cruise's private life isn't hidden in a single moment or a single decision. It's built over time, layer by layer, through belief, influence, and the constant need to maintain a version of reality that never breaks. And that's what makes it so difficult to define, because the more you look for a clear answer, the more it seems to move just out of reach. After everything we've seen, the success, the control, the patterns, the questions, what remains isn't a clear conclusion. It's something far more complicated. Because Tom Cruise doesn't fit into a simple narrative. He isn't just a movie star with a private life. He represents something more structured, more intentional, and more difficult to fully understand. On one side, there is undeniable achievement. Decades of consistency in an industry where most careers don't last, a level of discipline and commitment that few can match, the ability to maintain relevance, power, and influence across generations. That alone is rare. But on the other side, there is a level of distance that never quite disappears, a private life that remains largely out of view, not hidden in a dramatic way, but absent in a way that feels deliberate. And that absence becomes part of the story itself, because when something is consistently missing, it starts to feel like a choice, not an accident, not a coincidence, a decision. Maybe the truth isn't that something is being concealed, maybe it's that everything we see has already been carefully selected, that the version of Tom Cruise presented to the world is not incomplete, but complete in a very specific way. A version that is designed to function, to endure, and to never break. Or maybe the truth is simpler than that. Maybe this is what happens when a person spends a lifetime under pressure, under scrutiny, under expectations that never stop. A life where control becomes necessary, where boundaries become permanent, where privacy isn't just protection but survival. In the end, Tom Cruise remains exactly what he has always been. Visible to everyone, yet understood by very few. And perhaps that's the most revealing part of all, because sometimes the truth isn't hidden behind something. Sometimes it's right in front of us, shaped, refined, and repeated so many times that we stop questioning it. And when that happens, the real mystery isn't what we don't know. It's why we never looked closer in the first place. If this story made you question what you thought you knew, there are many more like it waiting beneath the surface. Subscribe to explore the hidden layers behind the world's biggest names, the patterns most people miss, and the truths that don't always come with clear answers.